Right, we're prepared. We've arrived. We're at a club. We've got the gear in front of us. How do you set the gear up for your style of DJing? Starting with the deck.
Okay, cool. So imagine I've just entered the DJ booth at the club or the festival. The first thing I'm doing when I look at this deck, I want to check where the tempo range is. When I'm using a CDJ, I want the tempo range to be on plus or minus 16. Obviously you have the options on a CDJ of 6, 10, 16 and wide, which is 100. I'm choosing 16 because it allows me to increase the tempo of the track quite a long way, decrease it quite a long way, but I'm still maintaining a bit of that accuracy that you get with the low ranges.
So the tempo slider there is not going to have the same settings, the same options if you're not using a Pioneer CDJ. You probably have some different variations, but pick one that's close to 16. It could be 15, could be 20%, 25% even, but pick something that's close enough to there so you get the range. And I guess it's because you can then mix tracks which are quite a lot slower or quite a lot faster.
Exactly that.
And still get them to the same tempo.
Yeah.
All right, so basically something more than the plus or minus 8, which is what is quite often the default on DJ gear.
Yeah.
What's next?
I'm going to make sure that master tempo is on. By default, I would have that on almost all the time. And what that does is that keeps the track playing in the same pitch when I speed it up or slow it down.
So that's going to be crucial for key mixing, and it's also crucial if you want to make tracks sound normal when they're quite a lot faster or slower than they should be. It might be called key lock. Probably isn't called master tempo if you don't have Pioneer gear. It might be called key lock or something along those lines, but it does the same thing. It has exactly the same effect. Normally a button right next to that fader. What else?
Yeah, so we've got the jog adjust speed. Now this affects how long this will spin for basically. So if I had this all the way over here, then the track will spin back forever. If I had this all the way over here to the heavy side, then it doesn't spin very far at all. So I tend to keep that at 12 o'clock and I find that's a good balance.
And if your equipment doesn't have a jog adjust, which most controllers don't have, don't worry about it in the slightest. It's fine. James has it in the middle anyway. So honestly, don't worry about it. It's all good.
Yeah, we've then got the vinyl mode on the CDJ, which is vinyl or CDJ, and that just affects the way that the jog wheel behaves and the things that you can do with the jog wheel. If that was on CDJ mode, I wouldn't be able to do spin backs. I wouldn't be able to stop the deck like that. However, when it's on vinyl mode, I can do all of those things, and they're a key part of the way I play.
Most controllers nowadays, they do give you the option, but it's always set in vinyl mode by default, and that's because the edge of the jog wheel gives you the mode that when vinyl mode's off, the whole jog wheel gives you. So it gives you two options: top for vinyl, edge for just nudging the... I mean, this is DJing 101, but you might have not seen that before, so just to clear that up. So basically, set it to vinyl mode, and you'll be good there.
Yep. And the final thing on the CDJ that I would look to is the vinyl speed adjust for the break. And now I have this at about somewhere between 12 and 1 o'clock. And what this does, this allows me to do pretty quick deck stops and starts, and that's kind of vital in some of the hype loop techniques that we'll be teaching later on.
So here, quite often especially on low end controllers, even some middle controllers, you don't get a knob like that here to adjust that. And you'll find that there are knobs in your settings, in your software, that will let you do that. And this is, again, how quickly the deck starts when you hit start and how quickly it stops when you hit stop. And you normally get both. And James likes to have them both set, as you say, so they start pretty quickly but not immediately, because you like that granular kind of feel to it. So I think that's everything on the deck, right?
Yeah.
But there's a mixer in the middle. Again, if you're on a controller, this is all the same unit, but you're still going to want to look for these things.
Yep.
Let's talk through your settings over here.
Okay, cool. So when I step up to the mixer, the first thing I'm going to look at is the fades on the channels. So on this Pioneer mixer, we have the crossfader fade. Now I want to make sure that the crossfader fade is as hard as possible. Like, this means that I'm going to get a very sharp cut when I go in and out from the side.
And basically it's like a switch. There's no fading.
It's like
just either on or off. So it's a very clean way of quickly flicking in and out of tracks.
Yeah.
And on some gear, all gear has that. It might be in your software settings, but all gear has that setting. There's no such thing as DJ software, however cheap your controller, where you can't somewhere alter that setting. So you've got that, and that's the important one.
Yeah.
But there is another one on higher end gear.
And we've got channel fader as well, which is, it's a similar thing. When we've got the channel fader selector all the way down here, then the fader is going to get very gradually louder, and it only gets really loud when you touch it right up to the top. When we've got it over on this side, it's going to start to get really loud from about there on the fader. And now that really helps with some of the cutting techniques that I'll be doing later in the course. We've also got the isolator or EQ section, which affects how these EQs work. When it's on EQ, they're not quite as harsh. When it's on isolator, you can really cut out the low end, cut out the mid, and cut out the high using these knobs. And so I would always choose it on the isolator.
The best way to test whether yours are set to isolator or equivalent is just to play a track and turn all EQs down, low, mid and high. If you can still hear anything at all, it's not on isolator mode. And then maybe go and look and see if you've got that. And if you haven't, again, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It will still be very quiet with everything turned down there, but you're not fully isolating the frequency, you're just reducing it a lot. And that's the difference between those two. I mean, most house DJs, I would guess, prefer isolator because there's more control, right? Yeah. Anything else on the mixer?
When we're looking at headphones, the way that I mix, I use in-ear monitors, which means that I will use a mono split so I can hear the master in one of my ears and the PFL in the other ear. However, if you're not using in-ear monitors, if you're using headphones, that's totally fine. You can still do everything that we're covering in this course just by having some speakers for your monitors and your headphones for your PFL.
So the way this works is PFL is another word for Q. And when you have it set to mono split, which is only on high-end mix, well, only on standalone mixers normally. You don't normally get this on DJ controllers and standalone gear. Some, but not much. When you have it set there, as James says, it will put into one ear what everyone else is hearing and into the other ear what your PFL or pre-fade listen or Q buttons are hearing.
Yep.
So in a way, you've got everything going on in your head with no need for any speakers. You can actually DJ like that. If everyone's in bed, you can do a whole set like that when no one can hear a thing, can't you? But it's not specific to your kind of mixing. You don't need to mix to do.
No, I could do what I'm doing with a pair of headphones and some monitor speakers.
One other thing, which I want to draw attention to here, which isn't really a setting on the mixer, but it's the way you always DJ, is you have your trim controls, which is, another word for this is gain, which sets the input level of the things coming into these channels before anything else, before the EQs, before the effects, before the line faders. You have these set quite low compared to some DJs.
Right. Well, I'm trying to avoid having the channel too loud. Like, because I'm a producer, I'm quite aware of these audio things which are going to affect the quality of the sound. And what I'm trying to achieve is a really good clean signal coming into the mixer, which allows us to boost it. We can do things that we want with the EQs without that signal clipping still. And then hopefully we can do all these cool things to it, even have 4 of them playing at once, and we can get all the way to the master and it's still a good volume. It's still not too loud.
So some DJs, it's always good to not be playing in the red. If you have these set higher so that the input signal before you've done anything to it is already very loud, it might sound all right then, but as soon as you start boosting the EQ a bit or throwing an effect on it or putting 2 or 3 of them together, you're overdriving it. So I think, James, you more than a lot of DJs we've worked with tend to like to keep this low in the first place to give you that headroom to do stuff with later on. It means you don't have to take stuff away in order to keep the signal clean. You can add stuff as well.
I also find with most of the records that I play, because they're modern mastered tunes, they all tend to be a very similar loudness to one another, so I don't tend to play with those too much from where they are.
So you kind of set those and forget them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've covered everything on the hardware settings, haven't we?
Yeah.
So the thing is, you're not going to have all these controls, which is fine. You're not going to have the same names on your controls, and they might not be in the same place. Some of them might be in the software settings, but you will be able to find certainly 90% of what we've talked about here. And honestly, walking up to gear that hasn't had any of these settings done on it, you'd probably be all right, wouldn't you? Apart from 1 or 2 really important ones. The key is important to be able to set the master tempo, the key lock. The vinyl control is important. Pretty much everything else you could probably work around, couldn't you? So that's the settings that you're looking for in your gear to set it up, just like James Hype.